University of Dice, Dave here. Been a minute, but I have a Houston recap for you. So, first, let's start off with an overview. I enjoyed myself. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed my friends, my teammates, kind of the same thing, really. I met some great people, hopefully, some new friends, which is really, really cool. Had some delicious food, or food as we're calling it these days, not fluid. Had some of that, whatever you call it. It was delicious. Notably, the salmon at a restaurant called Culture, which was just across the street from the convention center. Amazing flavor, and the staff was so chill. I loved it. I found my new favorite playmat and managed to finish my Penny slash Cassiopeia collection, which was really, really cool. And I accomplished the goal that I had for the event. I'll come back to that later. I'm going to recap my games, talk about a few different things, but I will go specific into lessons learned in another video. Now, what was my goal? I said this a couple of months ago in a video. It was to be in position to make day two. Now, notice it wasn't make day two. It was more important for me to identify the stuff I'd need to do to make it possible, to put me in position to make it happen, and then accomplish those items. Because those are things I can control, whereas things that go into making you day two can have a lot to do with variance of your deck, with variance of pairings, and all sorts of different things like that. So I wanted to put myself in the best position possible. I feel like I did that. And I did make day two, though those two things are mutually exclusive, unfortunately, because that's just how it works. So for the deck, I took Pot Noir. It's a pretty well understood deck. We, like many others, landed on the 4 Pokepad, 1 Hilda, only 2 Night Stretcher build. I can only promise that we, as I know others did too, landed on that final build mostly independently, which does feel good. Of course, like the other 58 cards have been pretty much decided for a long time. I'm not taking credit for any of that, but it does feel nice to see that our discussions and analysis were kind of on the right track, at least for those last 2 slots. Hilda was relevant in almost every single game that I played. I would not have won the games that I won without Hilda, at least not most of them, which was huge. Now, the interesting thing is, I almost did not take Pot Noir. Now, I had been prepping Pot Noir for the last several months. I've been feeling very good about it, but there is a little snag. I have multiple sclerosis, something I'm not shy about discussing, and I think I've mentioned it here before. And earlier in the week, I was having some issues, particularly with fatigue and focus, which is part and parcel with MS, unfortunately. And I was getting concerned, can I play a deck that's a little bit thinky like Pot Noir for a minimum of 16 and hopefully a lot more games? Now, the candidate deck as my backup was Goldengo. I had played it recently enough, but in the end, I did not switch. One, I did start to feel better, which was good. I had Dengo stuff with me as like a contingency, and that did reduce some stress. Two, I realized there were still changes in the deck and strategy that I need to make with Dengo compared to what I had done, and that'd create some burdens by itself. In all, I'm glad I didn't switch, although I think Dengo was fine. So overall, I went to day 2 at 4-0-4. Not thrilled about all the ties, but we'll talk about that. I finished 7-2-5. That's for 26 match points and a top 256 finish. Now, one of those ties, that was an ID. What about the other 4? 2 were legitimately amazing sets that went the distance. 2 others involved some slow play that included a judge getting involved. And I think I should have called that judge sooner than I did. And that's something we'll talk about in the lessons learned video. I won't get too deep into that here. So I started off round 1 against a pretty fun Yanmega Kangaskhan deck. I really liked what this guy had cooked. I could see the vision, and he definitely knew what he was doing. I was sorry to see he ended up going 0-3 drop, because I think he was onto something. Ultimately, at least in my case, I don't know what his other matchups were, he did not have an effective way to deal with the damage spread, and that was kind of that. Rounds 2 and 3 were 2 different Zorarg variants. Both of these were ties. I don't remember which game was which, to be honest with you. One of them was a long and excellent set, where in game 3, into the last turn, I needed either Dust Noir or Monkey Dory to win on that turn. They were both my last two prizes. The other was a bit bogged down by decisions of what to trade or similar. I probably should have gotten a judge involved. That's on me to just kind of get used to that. Both of the players were really like nice people and everything like that. No concerns there. But one of the two of them had a little bit in the way of slow play, in my opinion. And I should have taken some action there. My fault. Now, round 4, Terrazard. Wonderful opponent, good set. I made a misplay here that judges had to help rewind. This involved me mistakenly using a counter catcher after using Dusclops. The muscle memory, I do that, but the problem was I took a prize from that Dusclops. So luckily they were able to rewind things back, and I did get a double warning, absolutely deserved. I goofed hard. I managed to close it out regardless. On reflection, I think counter catching was a bad play anyway there. Resetting the positions was actually maybe better for me in the end. I was able to KO the Terapagos and the remaining Charmander to all but seal it. I was worried about getting a DPL, but I also think I was in a strong enough position in that game that it would not have mattered. Regardless, I don't want to make those kind of mistakes anyway. And that was on me. I really appreciated my opponent. It was very understanding. It certainly wasn't malicious. It was just a goof brought about from muscle memory, and I guess probably the ties were in my head as well, trying to make sure that I'm playing at a good clip. So, yep. Round 5 was a very nice guy playing Ceruledge. He had a good handle on what to do, but Ceru is very dependent on getting lots of energy into discard. And in games 1 and 3, he just couldn't get there fast enough. Once the Ceru line is dealt with, it's really hard for them to reestablish. You need to get that stage 2 back up on the board. But if your opponent is stopping you from doing that, it's really hard to get back ahead. So in the case of those games, he was often able to get to the first KO, but it was after I had swung once and prepped his board, and he didn't have a way to deal with the next Pult. I was really pleased with how I managed my board development here to make sure that that first KO wasn't going to hose me. Now, round 6 was a very nice person playing the Baby Ursaluna deck. However, it wasn't clear what it was, that Baby Ursaluna was even in it, until the end of game 2, when the Ursa finally came down and took that game. Now, as nice as this person was, they were playing rather slow. I believe they were newer to the game. They didn't have things down like shuffle speed and similar things to that. In the latter half of game 3, as time was starting to wind down, I did get a judge involved, but it was too late. I should have done so earlier. I felt bad talking about pace with him, but at the end of the day, it is a competition. I like to believe I was not being a jerk. Maybe I should have considered establishing a gentleman's before game 3 or something, but I'm not sure how that would have worked given his experience. In any case, the judge just kind of watched and then reminded at the end of the game how much time different actions should take. And, that was that. Round 7 was one of my favorite opponents of the tournament. This guy knew his deck. He didn't rush. He didn't slow play. He was very methodical, communicated every action very clearly, but succinctly. It just seemed like professional to me. Especially after getting 3 ties, I was so appreciative of this. I took game 1. It was a pretty textbook case of swinging onto 1-2 prizer and prepping another, and then swapping them. Game 2 was a scoop for me as I whiffed my setup. I took game 3 largely the same way I took game 1. Now, he had tried to mitigate my damage prep by getting some bravery charms involved, but Jamming Tower was going to allow me to take the day there. So I'm 403. I just need an ID to get day 2, and my opponent sits down. Really nice guy, a Poke Dad. He picked up the game because of his son and seniors. Both of us ID'd into our first ever day 2, which was really, really cool. We both held the pen to circle tie on the sheet and made a thing out of it. Had a wonderful chat, took a picture together, and actually continued to check in with each other the next day. So shout out to Walt. I hope you do more. So I'd done my main goal. I'd made day 2, but I didn't want to do just that. My desire wasn't to be 4, 6, and 4. I had more to do. So round 9, end of the first day, first thing of phase 2. What happens? Well, I tie against a Legacy Dengo. Now, this guy was a lot of fun. This was a legitimately awesome game. The first 2, we sort of traded bricks back and forth. The third game, we both had kind of scuffed hands and had to do our best to tread water. For him, that meant using continuous coin toss to KO a Dracloak. We had a lot of fun with the dice roll. Just kind of had a silly time with it all. If he doesn't KO that Loke, I'm certain that I win this, but it was not meant to be. And from that point, we just kind of both managed to not allow the other one to get completely set up. Time was called. There was nothing we could do. It was a tie. So the end of day one, we are 4-0-5. I had kind of had it up to here with ties, but I guess I would take those over losses. So in round 10, I faced off against a Meganium Ogre Pond deck that was really well constructed. It was a bit different from some others that I've seen, and I really appreciated the build. However, once you finish on some of those single prize setup Pokemon and bump a stadium, it takes away a lot of their momentum. I was glad to get another in the win column, so here we sit, 5-0-5, kind of evened out. Then came round 11, where I double bricked into a tough Goldengo matchup. There's not much to say. The guy knew his stuff. I believe he's actually qualified for Worlds. Good luck to him. There was very little I had the opportunity to do here. It's going to happen. And then round 12, I double bricked into my worst matchup while he kind of had the nuts. So this was Gardevoir. Just very quickly got the, game one was kind of bad. I'm like, all right, fine, scoop, next game. Let's keep going. I don't want this to go too long. And then game two, my board is very slow to set up once again, and he gets TM Evo going with a Ralts and Curlia on the bench. It just it wasn't going to go anywhere good from there. On the other hand, got a 40-minute break out of the deal. I took the opportunity to stretch my legs, take a walk so I could play the last two rounds refreshed. I'm 5-2-5. That's not where I want to finish. What can I do? Well, I can come back for round 13, where I play against a Typhlosion that had a Pidgeot and Battle Cage. I was able to Dusclops KO their Pidgeys both games and generally disrupt their setup until I could build a checkmate board state. They knew their deck extremely well, as I'd expect in day two, and it was a really fun set. Similar to Ceruledge, though, while they were able to build their board to KO the first Bolt, by then the spread was just too much for them to deal with, and I just kind of developed inevitability. Round 14. 6-2-5. What did pop into my head that if I drew, I would be 6-2-6, which is, right, Stitch's experiment 6-2-6, and I'm a big fan of that little blue guy. But I did want to finish with a win. And it took me into the last round before I faced the Mirror. Despite Dragapult variants representing about 18% of the meta at this event, I didn't face another Dragapult until round 14. Go figure. This guy had a faster kind of Pult with TM Evo, Sparking Crystal, Rare Candies. I admit to being intimidated by his board as he set it up. He chose to go second as he should. But as my run had taught me, and as my prep had taught me, Pult rewards patience. I stayed the course as much as his deck looked very threatening, the setup anyway. I did my bedewing, and I was able to keep things under control. This in spite of the early Dracloaks that he got down. Now, Dusclops was a big help there too, allowed me to take some early KOs on the bench Dracloaks that had energy. In game two, I actually nearly missed it when I established game on board and started taking some other actions. I think he might have thought I was being disrespectful. If he sees this, I was not. I'm very sorry. It was my 34th game of Pokemon that I played at that point in this tournament, and I was hanging on by a thread. Actually, in all, if you don't count the ID round, I played just 5 fewer games than the maximum I possibly could have. So it was a lot. I know my hands were starting to argue with me as I tried to shuffle my deck in round 14 as well. But I did it. 7-2-5. Good enough for 245th out of over 2,600 competitors. Now, in the end, my preparation paid off. As I mentioned, Pult rewards patience, and that was the number one trait I had worked on the last couple of months. It does take some stones to not feel demoralized by a strong setup on the other side, but Pult can and often does come through. It's hard to remember specific plays, but I do recall several multi-KO turns where my opponent remarked that they didn't even see that line as a possibility, which felt really good that I had really internalized some of that Pult math. I'll need to evaluate and discuss some more goals soon with an eye toward Indianapolis and NAIC. My regional performances have been a linear trend upward, right? Pittsburgh, 2-2-2, just getting my start. Milwaukee comes so close to making day two, and now here we step up again. I know now progress becomes a bit more incremental. It's kind of like in a video game like Diablo or Path of Exile, and those early gear upgrades are such a big jump that as you get deeper and deeper into your end game, it's like little teeny bits of min-maxing, and that's kind of where we are now. The good thing is I feel very confident in my method and the support of my teammates and friends, and I know I'll continue to develop as long as I put in the work alongside them. So all that stuff is for future videos, but if you were at Houston, tell me how it went. Maybe I saw you there. That'd be cool. Until next time, I've been Dave, and you've been watching University of Dice. Bye.